Move. I am ordering you to move. 3 words like a slap spoken loud enough for everyone on that jet to hear, and in a single heartbeat the room split into 2 kinds of people. The ones who look away and the ones who watch you shrink, waiting to see how small you'll make yourself. Yeah, that happened. My name is Maya Clark. Not the real name of the woman in the story, but think of me as the voice telling you what she felt. Picture this a mid-sized private jet, one late afternoon. Mellow light pouring through oval windows. People in tailored suits, a bottle of champagne, catching the sun. She walked in calm, carrying a carry-on, as ordinary as a suitcase can be expecting a normal flight, check-in, take-off, land, the sort of travel made boring by routine. Instead, she met a man who made power look like a uniform, and that man's first move was to make her disappear. Act 1. The humiliation up close. He was the flight captain. Nameplate, polished shoulders like a man who'd been bossing rooms his whole life. A voice built on the assumption that authority equals entitlement, and entitlement equals permission to humiliate. So he barked, "That seat isn't meant for your kind." Paused, let it hang, watched like a hawk for the reaction like he wanted applause for that line. The cabin went quiet the way people go quiet when they want to pretend they didn't hear a crime. She stood there, mid-30s, brown skin hair pinned back in a quiet crown, wearing a plain navy suit that said, "I belong, but I'm not here to brag." And the thing that hit first wasn't anger, it was small, hot humiliation, the kind that slides under your ribs and tells you to fold. But she'd been practicing a different response for years. Her grandmother used to say, "Maya, be steady, be kind, but don't be weak." And in that moment she felt those words like a lifeline, so she said, calm and steady, "Sir, this is my seat. It's assigned on my boarding pass." And his laughter came out like gravel. "Boarding pass," he sneered. "This cabin's for people who matter." And the investor next to him lifted his glass and smirked like they were both watching a private show. The kind of theater where the punchline is always on the person being pushed aside. Flight attendants shuffled their smiles stretched thin. Some passengers nodded like they'd seen this before. Others looked away because looking is a risk. It's easier to turn your head than take the hit with somebody else's dignity. She walked to the back when he ordered her, slow, deliberate, every step burning. And as she passed faces that could have been hers, she felt a change, like something inside moved from small and ashamed to quiet and very dangerous, because humiliation has a way of waking up the parts of you that have been folded down for too long. Act 2. The pivot, the evidence, the escalation. Here's where it shifts. Nobody in that cabin realized she wasn't just another passenger who could be shoved into the shadows. She was a founder, a technologist who'd spent years making flights safer, and she wore a slim bracelet that looked like jewelry, but was actually a data recorder. Vibration patterns, cockpit chatter. Sensor logs, all encrypted and ready to stream the truth if needed. She didn't pull it out to threaten, she pulled it out because truth is the only weapon that breaks that kind of arrogance. Then the plane did something unnatural. Not weather. A jagged, sudden dip, cups flying, an infant crying. A motion that didn't match the sky. People muttered, someone asked if it was turbulence, but she felt it in another register. It was purposeful, targeted, a pilot showing teeth. Later, a young flight attendant admitted in a whisper, "He does this when someone annoys him, toggles the autopilot to scare people, call it discipline." Discipline for who? For anyone who dares to take up space without an invitation, apparently. Inside the cockpit, the captain was running a little theater of control. He thought of himself as judge and jury in the air, able to bend systems to fit his ego to make people apologize without ever hearing the word. That was until the first officer, a tired, honest man named Henry, slid a folded handful of flight logs down the aisle to her, his hands shaking like they carried a confession. He'd worked under the captain for 8 years, watched him overwrite records, seen the safety margin shaved thin like a rumor. And now he was looking at her like maybe someone would finally listen. She listened, then she acted the only way that matched what she knew. She recorded, she checked the logs, she toggled the bracelet. It began to upload in real time to a secure channel, and she walked forward, right up to the cockpit door, and knocked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a knock that said accountability. When the captain opened the door, his face was a map of rage, the kind you get when your script is ripped away. "Who the hell is banging on my cockpit door?" he spat. "You caused enough chaos," he snarled, and you could feel the plane tighten, like a room where someone pulled a curtain and the light got mean. She didn't yell back. She looked him in the eye, slow and clear. "You're endangering this aircraft, and I'm asking you to stop overriding safety." And that quiet sentence is what made him lose his compass. He tried to regain control, chest-puffing voice getting louder. Threats poured out the kind that mean you own the room, and anyone who disagrees can be erased. "Back up, or I'll restrain you," he said, and the cabin folded into a panic. But the first officer stepped between them this time, voice thin but steady. "Captain, we're escalating. You need to stabilize." And then he said the word that changed everything. "Yes, it's true," and confirmed the falsified logs right there. Admitted the lies out loud. That admission was the fuse. At that point, the bracelet had uploaded key data, audio of threats timestamps that didn't match his log entries. The manipulation of systems. Raw, damning, undeniable evidence. She said quietly, "This is being recorded and transmitted," and you could see something heavy snap across his face. The man who'd been untouchable for years now realized he had been filmed in the one place where he thought cameras couldn't follow, behind the badge where fear had been his tool. Act 3. The fallout. The justice and the harder question left behind. What followed was both immediate and messy, the way truth usually is. The first officer announced an emergency, took command under protocol. The plane leveled out, and when they landed, federal agents were waiting. He was escorted off in cuffs, not as an indictment of one man's pride, but as the symptom of a system that had let him run unchecked for too long. The investors who laughed in the cabin found themselves explaining their behavior to investigators. The crew finally told stories they'd kept to themselves for years, and the hangar where they debriefed felt for the first time in a long time like a place where people could breathe. She stood on that tarmac days later, not triumphant in the way power sometimes looks, not gloating, just steady. She told the press the same thing she'd told the crew: technology couldn't fix a culture that values status over safety, and it was time to change how complaints were handled to protect the people who raised their hand, not punish them. She promised independent reporting channels, transparent reviews, protections for whistleblowers, and a commitment that no badge would trump a life. People cheered, some cried, some snapped pictures. But underneath the applause was a gnawing question: how many more like him had gone unexposed? How many systems supported him by design, not by accident? Justice in that moment looked good on paper. Arrests, revoked licenses, policies rewritten. But justice is not just momentary vindication. It's culture work. Long, slow work, and that's harder because it asks people to change habits, to risk speaking up, to stop looking away. So here's the part I want to sit with you on. She didn't go up there to be a hero. She went up there because someone had to do what the system wouldn't. She used tools she built to force truth into daylight, and that mattered. But it also raises a question. Should it always take someone with power to fix what power breaks? Isn't that backwards? If safety relies on a billionaire founder walking into a cockpit, then the system is still fragile. Close. The human pulse of the story. If you've ever been told you don't belong, or watched someone be made small for no reason other than their face, or how they dress, you know the feeling she felt. A mix of shame, an urge to hide, and then a surprising, fierce clarity. You also know how easy it is to look away, to think, "That's not my fight," and then act surprised when something catastrophic happens. This story isn't only about vindication, it's about the messy responsibility of looking up and doing something when you see wrongdoing, whether that's reporting it, recording it, or just refusing to laugh along. Call to action. Make this a conversation, not an echo chamber. Tell me what you think. Was she right to record and expose him like that, even if it meant public humiliation? Should the system have protected the crew sooner? Or is this on all of us for letting hierarchy silence truth? Drop a comment with a story you've seen or lived through. Something small that felt like the first tooth of a bigger problem, or something big that made you wonder why no one stopped it sooner. Because if we only clap when the show is over, we miss the work that keeps people safe in the first place. If this moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share. Not to celebrate one moment, but to start a conversation about who gets to hold power on the plane, in the office, and in our lives. You know what I mean?